Good evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tezz, and on this show we talk about all the things going on currently in the world of our favourite genre, horror. Whether it's films, whether it's TVs, whether it's video games, as I refer to them, we take a little look at the latest in the world of horror news. And sometimes we have some reviews, and occasionally I may even have what's known as a featured presentation, taking a look at some of the best in the world of horror, whether it's filmmakers, whether it's film series, whether it's slasher kings and queens, who knows? We cover a few different things. Now, we're not going to have a featured presentation on this evening's show, but we do have a couple of reviews. We'll get to those a little bit later on, but as usual, we tend to open the show with a little bit of an update here and there. So, fans who have been watching on YouTube, or probably most likely Twitch and also TikTok, will notice that this past week the streaming has gone a bit quiet. Not to fear, it's not a case of, anything's sort of stopping with the streaming. We will finish Dead Space. Don't worry about that. We will finish Dead Space on the Xbox Series X. No, it's been one of those weeks where there's just a lot going on, and it's just not really seemed appropriate to do any streaming, or time hasn't really been available. There's a lot going on with work, a lot going on with the household, planning a wedding. These things always get very, very crazy busy. But I will be endeavouring to get back to streaming, whether that is this Sunday, resuming retro streaming, and whether that resuming is the Nintendo 64 with Legend of Zelda, or whether that is returning back to I can't remember the name of the place. Not Zanakin, because that's been destroyed, but Spirit, I think it is. Whether it's returning to the world of Final Fantasy X on the Nintendo Switch. Now, speaking of which, my Nintendo Switch gaming has been even more revitalized. I've certainly found, pretty much for the first time since owning the console, maybe outside of the Panny D, where me and everyone were playing Animal Crossing, the Nintendo Switch is one of those consoles that has, for the majority of the lifespan of owning one, gathered dust. I tend to find that if I'm going to play a console, I'm going to play a console on the TV. And if I'm going to play a console on the TV, it's going to be the Xbox or PlayStation. And it tends to switch around between which one's my preferred. I always used to, when I lived at my flat, it used to be the PlayStation. The Xbox would occasionally get a go, but it was generally the PlayStation, much better exclusives. And then recently, whether it's due to the setup I have, where I have my Xbox in my office and the PlayStation's in the living room, just find it more comfortable playing on the Xbox. Sure, the PlayStation exclusives, there's not really been that many new releases in the last year or so. Not necessarily to say that they have on the Xbox, but it's just the features of the Xbox, the quick resume, multiple games. I prefer the controller. It plays a bit nicer, but I still do love the PlayStation. I just maybe if I move the PlayStation into my office, somehow I'll have to get an extension built to be able to fit that console in here. But somehow or when, I'll play a bit more PlayStation. But predominantly, the streaming we've been doing has been on the Xbox, if not busting out the old retro Nintendo 64. But I have always sort of found that if I'm going to play a Nintendo Switch, it's, generally a handheld console, I'll pick it up like this, as is. And that's fine. It's not super comfortable. The Joy-Cons, as cool as it is, taking them off, putting them into a controller attachment, using them two-player, even just sort of holding them one in each hand while the screen is set up somewhere else, it's just not really actually that comfortable. The ergonomics of the Joy-Cons isn't that great. So I've been seeing for a little while on social media about, and this is going to look like a sponsored plug. It's certainly not. Nothing sponsors, no sponsorship money's coming yet. But one thing that I have been seeing on a few sort of like video game, not streamers, but social media accounts where people talk about like cozy gaming, chill vibes, that sort of stuff. One guy, Chill Ambient Games or something like that, has mentioned a few times about the Nitro deck. This little thing here. Fairly inexpensive. Switch just slots into the top there. And it's just the ergonomics. You've got a couple of extra buttons there, which I don't know how to use on the back of the console, but it just feels so much nicer to hold. And I've just been playing so much more Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X since that point. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that I'd ever really kind of get back into the Switch. I think I've owned like 2 or 3 Switches over the years and tend to sell them because they just don't get much use from me. But I'm having such a good time getting back into Final Fantasy X. I played it back in the day when it first came out. I've restarted it a couple of times because I've got like a version on my PlayStation. And I think the only thing that is off-putting from getting back into the game is the opening hour or two. Lots of FMVs, lots of unskippable cutscenes. It is a bit of a slog to get back to get the story going and the gameplay going, and it's still very stop-start now. And even when you are playing, it's just a lot of fights occurring. So it's my first Final Fantasy. It's not my favorite, but it's my first, and yeah, been playing a lot of that. So haven't been on stream, but maybe we'll continue that. I do feel I should knuckle down and get on with Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, because I've banged on about it. But yeah, essentially Final Fantasy X is what I'm going to be discussing about when I eventually get around to recording the retro video gaming bonus podcast, non-Patreon exclusive, just a bonus podcast going out audio only on podcast platforms. So got that to look forward to. Maybe. Outside of that, I've watched a couple of films. So later on, after the news, we are going to be doing reviews of Never Let Go, the Halle Berry survival horror that I've recently watched. It was out in the cinema late last year. That is now available on Amazon Prime. And I've got to watch a film today which I've been very much looking forward to after hearing a fair amount of hype for it on the news, and that is The Rule of Jenny Penn, New Zealand's psychological horror film with John Lithgow and Geoffrey Rush. There's been a fair amount of chatter about it, and it's a film where I can't remember the exact comment, but Stephen King had said it was his favourite film of 2024, something along those lines. It's quite a comment to have. You may hear the dogs going off downstairs. They've had their dinner. I don't know what their problem is today. They're just being incredibly annoying. But such as is. And finally, on sort of the catch-ups, a little bit of an exclusive, but won't be able to review it until Monday the 14th of April. I will be reviewing the film that's been getting talked about a fair amount due to some of the comments on the festival circuit, The Ugly Stepsister. Been given a preview copy of that, so very much looking forward to giving that a watch. And that review, as I say, will be going out week commencing Monday the 14th of April. I'll probably try and do like a bonus pod for that, or if not, record it ahead of time. Who knows? Without further ado, and I should actually mention, I think this may be the first podcast since the recording of the second episode of 90 Slay Fiancé. I think that is right, actually. There's been so much going on this week that it's really difficult to keep track of whether I'm coming or going. Last weekend we recorded the second episode, the Patreon exclusive bonus podcast, 90 Slay Fiancé. What that is my fiancée Victoria, she likes some horror films. She has a niche. She likes creature features, Jaws, those sorts of things. But there's a lot of classics out there from various directors or series that she's never seen before. So we've watched the first episode of Mulholland Drive. She had opinions on that. And then for the second episode, we watched The Blair Witch Project. She shocked me with a couple of her metaphors. So if you followed on the TikTok or Instagram reels, you may have seen a clip from that show. But be sure to check it out. You can join Patreon. Obviously, it's on one of the paid tiers. It's part of the Patreon. That's how it works. But consider being a free member on Patreon. You'll get updates as they go. You'll get my blog, but also it builds up the overall fan base on the platform. So even if you don't have the available spare cash to support the show on Patreon, which is completely understandable, consider being a free member because it's free. There you go, and just helps build up the visibility of the channel. Anyway, I'll save all the proper shilling until the end of the episode. It's now time that we jump into the world of horror news. This is the news. Oh. There we go. That's the horror news jingle. Now, we are still in a bit of a horror lull, to be fair. There is no new list on bloodydisgusting.com to give me all the updates on the latest films that have been released this week or this coming week. Which is a shame, but I guess not much is being released in that time. So, I'm not going to complain. I use their content for content on the show. Very much appreciated. Always, mention who your sources are. So, bloodydisgusting.com, we're going to start off with a bit of a poster reveal. So, from John Squires, The Hook returns on official I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot poster. Jennifer Love Hewitt is back as 90s slasher heroine Julie James in the I Know What You Did Last Summer legacy sequel from Sony, and the official poster has arrived. Check out the poster below and expect more, including the first trailer very soon. Jennifer Caitlin Robinson is directing the brand new installment in the slasher franchise, which brings the 90s horror saga back to theatres on July 18th, 2025. Freddie Prinze Jr. will also reprise his role from the original two movies, with this new installment coming almost 27 years after the release of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. In this year's new movie, when five friends inadvertently cause a deadly car accident, they cover up their involvement and make a pact to keep it a secret rather than face the consequences. A year later, their past comes back to haunt them and they're forced to confront a horrifying truth. Someone knows what they did last summer and is hell-bent on revenge. As one by one the friends are stalked by a killer, they discover this has happened before, and they turn to two survivors of the legendary Southport Massacre of 1997 for help. Billy Campbell, Chase Sue Wonders, Madeline Klein, Sarah Pidgeon, Tyreek Withers, Jonah Joaquin, Lola Tung, Nicholas Alexander Chavez, Austin Nichols, and Gabriette will be among the fresh faces joining the franchise's legacy cast members. Jennifer Caitlin Robinson is set to direct the new installment in the franchise for Sony, with Leah McKendrick writing the original draft of the screenplay. Jim Gillespie directed the original 1997 slasher I Know It Did Last Summer, which was written by Kevin Williamson and based on Lewis Duncan's novel. Okay. That's an interesting way for the legacy characters to be involved, because I can't remember if in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer there was any sort of post-police investigation, post-credits or anything like that. But the whole point of that film is that they committed a vehicular manslaughter and covered it up, tried to cover it up. And the individual hadn't died, and there was obviously things that went on. And I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is actually better than I think it got credit for. And I didn't watch it for a long time because it got bad reviews, but it's actually a lot of fun. And it's got Jack Black doing a Jamaican accent, which is all kinds of weird. It is as you think it is. But for them to be working as consultants, we thought we killed someone, and rather than go to the authorities, we flung them into the water, and then they weren't actually dead and came back and killed all our friends twice. I mean, I'm down for it. It's a fun little franchise. I've still actually not watched the third one. I know it's meant to be terrible, but it's on my to watch list. And hey, maybe I need to do an episode on the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise. You know what? I'll make a note of that now because I will forget. Speaking of which, we have put a little kind of community poll out there to discuss what to talk about in a future episode. So I think the consensus, there's been a mixture of reviews or submissions, should I say, but I think the general consensus is Wolf Creek. Which I'm not massively looking forward to. I mean, my opinion may have changed, but I've only seen the first episode, the first film, not episode. So let me just make a note. I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise. Okay, so this is going to be the next week or the week after, depending on depending on the availability of the Wolf Creek series. So I saw Wolf Creek, the first one, when it first came out. Probably got the DVD release, no doubt. Thought it was pretty gnarly at the time, but I must admit, it's not a film that I've ever actually had an interest in going back to watch. Now that may well change when I similar to when I rewatched the Saw series. I always thought, okay, the original's a classic. Pretty much from the third point onwards, I kind of started losing interest. Didn't watch a lot of them because it just felt like it's people that aren't necessarily really that good being tortured, dismembered, whatever, one by one. Who are we rooting for here? Are we, I'm all for like the on-screen slasher, whether they've got quips like Freddy, whether they're stalk and slash like Michael Myers and brutal like Jason. Whatnot. I'm all for those, but you also have to balance it with some protagonists that you can care about. It's that for me, that's really the only way it works. If they're all just either not really that nice or they're just spending the entire time getting tortured, that's not for me. And I appreciate that it's inspired by a true story. I don't think it's technically based on a true story, because if it was based on a true story, in terms of characters, names and whatnot, which I'm pretty sure isn't the case, then that would be a little bit too exploitative, because then you're glorifying real people by name getting butchered. That's not right, really. There's ways and means to do that, but I think similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre is inspired by Ed Gein. I think the true case is probably a bit closer than the Ed Gein case to Texas Chainsaw, but still. So because of that, I never watched the sequel, and I believe that there's 2 films and a TV series, and I think there's only 1 series of the TV series. I'm not too sure. I mean, while I'm jabbering on, I think I will have a little look on Prime Video. Wolf Creek. Because I feel in those situations, it's almost like the antagonist is your anti-hero, and it's like, yeah, but they're mauling people in horrific ways. Okay, so Wolf Creek, 2 seasons. And it's only available for purchase, even though I'm pretty sure it used to be on Prime. Okay. Wolf Creek 2 is available for purchase. Why is none of this on Shudder? And it's the first Wolf Creek does not appear to be on Prime Video, which is a little bit odd. I'll just have a quick look to see if it's cheaper picking up the physical copies. Okay, well, the DVD of Wolf Creek is £6. The Blu-ray of Wolf Creek Series 1 is £12. Wolf Creek Series 2 on Blu-ray is £9. Okay. What about Wolf Creek 2? It's just available on Prime Video. Right, okay. May have to look to see if they're on like a Tubi or something. I don't... it may be that Wolf Creek episode comes a little bit later on. I'm not dropping any coin on that right now while a wedding is is being planned. Certainly not at those prices. But anyway, I know we did last summer, reboot, requel. I'm interested in it. I'm interested to see how it works. It does make me want to rewatch the original though, so that's always good. Yeah, maybe I'll start with the third one though, just so I can actually get it out the way. Anyway, moving on. John Carpenter says he'd love to direct again given the right circumstances. Exciting. John Squires writes up. It's now been 15 years since John Carpenter directed his last movie, 2010's The Ward, but the horror master's been staying busy with music, comic books, and various other projects. Not long after he finally receives his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame this April, for starters, Carpenter is playing music live in both LA and New York, and he's even agreed to score Bong Joon-ho's new horror movie. But will Carpenter himself ever return to the director's chair? Oh my god, I've got the hiccups now. It's a question the director of horror classics including Halloween, The Fog, and The Thing has been asked many times over the years, and Variety is the latest outlet to pop the question. John Carpenter's response? Well, he'd have to find the right circumstances. Plans? I don't know, Carpenter answered when specifically asked if he has any plans to return to directing. I would love to direct again, given the right circumstances, but I'm not the same kid anymore who will do it for any amount of money. I can't back into a budget anymore. I'm too old, it's too hard, but directing is the love of my life. I'll never stop loving that. It's a similar answer to the one Carpenter gave to the very same question back in 2019 when he told Collider that he'd love to make a little horror movie, but with a catch to the statement. Carpenter said in 2019, "It would be a project that I like that's budgeted correctly. Nowadays they make these young directors do movies for 2 million when the movie is written for 10 million. So you have to squeeze it all in there, and I don't want to do that anymore." John Carpenter actually did return to the director's chair back in 2013 for the Peacock series John Carpenter's Suburban Screams, directing an episode of the series remotely from home. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of no secret John Carpenter is my favourite director, really, not just in the world of horror, but I guess just overall. I just think he had such a good run of iconic, incredible films. Obviously I've mentioned a million times how Halloween started my love of horror. And he's had pretty much generally a home run career. Some of the films haven't necessarily smashed it, and The Ward was, maybe I need to give it a second watch, but it just didn't really feel like a John Carpenter film. It kind of just felt like any other odd film that came out around the 2010s, bad CGI, jump scares for the sake of it. It didn't really feel like a John Carpenter film. Even his later films, like prior to that, like Escape from LA and Ghosts of Mars. Again, Escape from LA I'm not really that much of a fan of, but Ghosts of Mars I thought looked kind of crappy, and I watched it. It's fun. It's got the dodgy CGI of the late 90s, but it still feels like a John Carpenter film. So if the potential for him to return and direct something before it's too late, I'm always going to be interested to see what can happen. And if he could direct something pretty cool, and that meant that The Ward wasn't his final film, even better. But I saw him live doing his music a few years ago in the UK, and it was incredible. Hearing his original pieces, but also the scores that he's done for a number of his films was really quite special. So got a lot of love for John Carpenter. Whatever he does next, I'll be interested. Next up, Hell House LLC Lineage, getting a theatrical release from Iconic Events. It's Eddie the Beast's favourite, John Squires. The fifth and allegedly final instalment in the franchise, Hell House LLC Lineage, is going big with a theatrical release announced by Iconic Events releasing today. Terror Films releasing has teamed with Iconic Events to bring Hell House LLC Lineage to theatres this summer before premiering exclusively on Shudder in late October. The film is set to hit theatres sometime in August. Stay tuned for an exact date. We're committed to supporting fresh, bold voices in horror. Stephen Cognetti and Hell House LLC Lineage are a perfect example of the kinds of stories that excite us. We're eager for fans to experience it, says Mark Roop, CFO/COO and co-founder of Iconic Events Releasing. This installment sees the return of several characters from Hell House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor, including the Carmichael siblings, Patrick, Catherine and Margaret. Also returning are Margot and Rebecca, who met their demise in the Carmichael Manor, and Alice Harper, the documentarian and journalist played by Sierra Sorka. Returning in the leading role is Elizabeth Vermillier as Vanessa Shepard, the documentarian who died but was resurrected in Hell House LLC Lake of Fire, the one I've not seen yet, so a bit of a spoiler for me there. Written and directed by Stephen Cognetti, the new film takes a deep dive into the murders that have been occurring in the town of Abaddon for decades. Here's the synopsis. Haunted by visions and recurring nightmares years after a near-death experience, Vanessa Shepard finds herself living in the town of Abaddon, unable to break free from its inexplicable hold on her. When people around her suddenly and inexplicably begin to die, she soon uncovers her terrifying connection to the Abaddon Hotel, Carmichael Manor, and the mysterious murders that have been occurring for decades. This is by far the biggest Hell House of the series, so experiencing it in a theatre is definitely the best way to consume the final chapter. For the story, scope and scares, I wanted to write in Lineage. Found footage was going to be too restrictive to make the film that I wanted to make. I set out to make a Hell House movie like you've never seen, and I promise you won't be disappointed in the change of format, director Stephen Cognetti teases. Yes, that means Hell House LLC Lineage will be ditching the found footage format. Terror Films releases will be dropping a promo exclusively on their official YouTube channel, Shocks and Docs, on April 2nd at 7 p.m. PST. So yeah, there'd been rumours that it was no longer found footage based on some of the shots that have been released thus far. And I think that's interesting, because one thing that can happen in the world of found footage franchises, you know, and the example I will use, not necessarily is going to be what had been occurring with Hell House, because I thought the first Hell House LLC wasn't all it was hyped up to be. Personally, I'd heard so much buzz that it's brilliant, it's the best one in the series, but it's great, so scary. I watched it, wasn't that fussed, but I've seen better found footage. I watched then the prequel, The Carmichael Manor, when that dropped on Shudder last year. I thought it was great. It was such a step up. Since subsequently watched the second one, I thought that was really bad. So I haven't seen the third one yet, but I will at some point. Point being is that for a found footage series to continue, there's nothing to say you can't keep churning out found footage entries, but there's also nothing to say that it has to remain found footage. I remember watching the first Horror in the High Desert and thinking, wow, this looks brilliant. There's a second one that's already out. I'm excited. Watch the second one. Kind of disappointed. It's not as good as the first. And I watched the third one. The tension is a bit better than 2, I think, but the reveals near the end, and it just felt like it's going for that trope of reading a thriller novel where every chapter ends with a but oh my god, this has now been found. And it's like it just felt like we're dragging this out. And when we get to a point when it feels like a story's being dragged out, you have to question, does the director have an ending in mind? And I tend to think I like a film that has a definitive ending. Now, when I say definitive, whether there's ambiguity there, sure, but a film that dangles a plot thread, I kind of think, okay, if this is good and it has my interest and you dangle a plot thread, I'm going to be interested to see what happens next, sure. But if the return on investment is not quite as good, and then we've got another dangling plot thread, that is going to wear out. That's going to wear thin pretty quickly. And that's what I was finding with Horror in the High Desert. Now, I think with Hell House, if I'd watched 1, 2, and 3 in order, I may not have watched the prequel. I mean, again, I'm assuming that the second is as bad as the third, but the second was bad. No, I'm assuming the third was as bad as the second, I should say, but the second was bad. So it is fortunate that I watched them out of order. But things being changed up for this format to kind of go hard or go home, I don't mind so much. It's not putting me off. I know that there's been some discourse online of, it's not really a Hell House film if it's not found footage. Like, well, you know, give it a go. Give it a try. You may be surprised. I mean, I don't think found footage fans only watch found footage films. I think that would be a little bit like shutting yourself off from a lot of potentially great films. But I'm open to seeing what they do with Hell House LLC lineage. Looking forward to the trailer. So, next up, David Cronenberg spotlights... Read that wrong. Criterion Channel spotlights David Cronenberg in April. Megan Navarro writes up, next month brings the release of The Shrouds, the latest from legendary filmmaker David Cronenberg. The Criterion Channel, which I didn't know there was a Criterion Channel, is celebrating accordingly with a director's spotlight of his audacious work. Cronenberg's The Shroud will open on April 18th in New York and Los Angeles, before expanding nationwide on April 25th, 2025. But you can begin streaming the directed by David Cronenberg titles on Criterion Channel beginning April 1st. The programming selection includes a mix of classic Cronenberg body horror and underseen gems, including racing action movie Fast Company and early sci-fi works. The programming section includes the Criterion Collection edition Dead Ringers, in which Jeremy Irons delivers an impressive double performance as twin gynecologists who spiral into a dizzying madness, exasperated by drugs and sexual confusion. It'll include an audio commentary by director David Cronenberg, Irons, and other crew members, as well as other supplemental materials. There's a whole extra thing going on there. But the films involved Stereo from 1969, Crimes of the Future 1970. I didn't know his recent Crimes of the Future was a remake of his own film. There we go. Learn something new every day. Rabid from 77, The Brood from 79, Fast Company from 79, Scanners from 1981, and Dead Ringers from 1988. Yeah, I like some David Cronenberg. He's certainly never been my favorite. I've watched a number of films I watched a number of his films later on, but I had seen the notorious ones such as Scanner when I was much younger because of the infamous head explosion scene. The first one, I should say. And then The Fly, but for a long time I haven't seen a number of his other films. I've since watched Rabid, The Brood, haven't seen Dead Ringers, and I've watched the recent Crimes of the Future. But yeah, I like some David Cronenberg. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a fan. I've not seen enough of his films where I've gone, wow, that was incredible. They're not connected to me in that way, but I do like Criterion. As snobby as that might sound. And then finally on the horror news, Behind the Curtain, Stranger Things, The First Shadow. Documentary coming to Netflix in April. Alex DiVincenzo writes, with Stranger Things, The First Shadow launching its first preview performance tonight on Broadway, Netflix has announced Behind the Curtain, Stranger Things, The First Shadow. Follow the cast and crew as they race against time to prepare the ambitious, critically acclaimed West End stage play, which opened at London's Phoenix Theatre in December 2023. Premiering April 15, the documentary is directed by John Halperin. Stranger Things The First Shadow is written by Kate Treffy, based on an original story by Stranger Things creators the Duffer Brothers, Jack Thorne and Treffy. Serving as a standalone prequel to the hit series, the Olivia Award-winning play is directed by Stephen Daldry and co-directed by Justin Martin. In 1959, Hawkins, Indiana, the Creel family seeks a fresh start, especially their teenage son Henry, who is eager to escape his troubled past. Initially, things go well. He finds friendship and joins the school play. But when a wave of shocking crime strikes the town, Henry is forced to confront a terrifying truth. Is there something inside him that connects him to the horrors unfolding around him? As this thrilling mystery races forward, shadows of the past are unleashed, relationships are tested, and the town of Hawkins faces the ultimate question. Can the power of friendship outshine the darkness within? The first time we saw the play, we were blown away, said Ross Duffer. They pulled everything off and then some. It was one of the most thrilling experiences of our lives, added Matt Duffer. Tickets for Stranger Things The First Shadow are on Broadway, and they're on sale now. Whew, a lot to get through there. So I am interested to watch this play. I'm a big Stranger Things fan, and I love the last series. I need to give it a rewatch at some point. I do want to rewatch the series, but Victoria's never seen Stranger Things, and she mentioned she'd like to watch it. It's just getting it committed to watching. But before the new series comes out, I will definitely be rewatching the last series at least. Come hell or high water. But this does feel as though it's a prequel based around Vecna, the character that becomes Vecna. Spoiler alert. And it does sound interesting. I mean, the fact it's award-winning. I do enjoy a bit of theatre, I have to say. So I would like to watch this, but I feel for me and Victoria to watch it, I have to get her to watch the TV series first. Otherwise, a lot of it probably won't make sense, and its importance probably won't make sense. So we've got a long way to go before I watch the show. But the documentary about it, I do feel I want to watch the show before watching the documentary about it, because then kind of feel like a lot of the big moments in that may be spoiled a little bit. But if you have seen the stage play, you're getting a documentary come to Netflix. Keep an eye out for that. Give that a watch when it hits on April 15th. Right, Ghouls and Fiends, that is it for the horror news. That was the news. Oh. Now it's time for reviews. So, as per all of our review segments, we talk about a film that I've recently watched. We are going to talk about the highs, the lows. I've realised that my camera's on a Dutch angle. Bit weird. Right, I don't know what's going on there. Looks like it's a... Oh, it's probably my monitor. There we go. Looks like it was on a Dutch angle. Nerdy film term there. Anyway, with the reviews, we talk about a film I've recently watched, whether it's a new film or whether it's a retro review. We discuss what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, the highs, the lows, and I give it a score out of 10. So, starting off with the 2024 American survival horror thriller, Never Let Go, directed by Alexandra Ayer and written by Casey Clocklin and Ryan Graspy. Film stars Halle Berry. Alexandra Ayer, actually, it's a director I've not... I feel like I've watched a number of his films, but then I don't actually feel like I've watched much of his films recently. He did the remake to The Hills Have Eyes. He did Switchblade Romance, originally called Haute Detention, which I've still never got around to seeing because I think the ending was ruined for me before even being aware of the film. Mirrors, which is on my list to try and get around to watching at some point. Piranha 3D, which is just fun. Horns, which I always forget about, but it's based on a pretty good Joe Hill novel. And Crawl from 2019, which was decent, the alligator attack film. So maybe I have seen all of his films then. Well, there we go. I've not seen Oxygen. Yeah, or I've not seen The Pyramid either, which he produced. Okay. But he also produced Maniac from 2012, and I love that. So there we go. Anyway, Alexandra Ayer, like some of his stuff. So, we'll talk a bit about the plot first for Never Let Go. So, Mama and her two young children, Nolan and Samuel, live in a cabin in a large forest. According to Mama, a supernatural force known as the Evil has spread across the world, leaving them the only survivors. Mama is besieged by visions of supernatural entities that her sons cannot see but believe are real. Family spends their days foraging and hunting for food. To prevent the evil from touching them, which Mama says ensures possession, the family must have ropes tied when they leave the house, connecting them back to the building. The boys must also chant a daily prayer to the house and thanks for it keeping them safe from the evil. While out foraging one day, Samuel and Nolan get into an argument until Nolan intentionally steps on Samuel's rope, causing Samuel to fall, getting disconnected from his rope and breaking his ankle. Nolan unties himself to try and rescue Samuel. The boys are rescued by Mama, who encounters the evil in the shape of her mother. As Samuel recovers from his fall, Nolan, who has started to doubt his mother's claims, questions him on what he saw, but Samuel dismisses his suspicions. Okay, so that kind of gives you a gist, if you haven't seen this film, of what the gist, the overall kind of tone is of the film. So, it's a lot of it is about paranoia, really, in terms of questioning whether the mother's obsessive rules in this world are purely paranoia, or if, and you know, maybe she's suffering through some mental health problem, mental illness, or that what she's saying is true, and that there is this entity called the Evil, which so far it appears that only she has witnessed, that she has interactions with. It appears sometimes as her husband, the boy's father, who apparently became infected previously, possessed, and had to be taken care of. It asks those questions, but the film is essentially run by the performances of the three main characters in this, and especially the kids do a great job, Samuel and Nolan. Nolan is almost like our de facto lead in this. He is the one that is questioning whether what the mother is saying is accurate. But he also suffers from sleepwalking. I don't know what the correct term for that is. Where he will wake up outside of the house without the rope attached to him. Very potentially dangerous situation if what is being said is correct. I would say that on the whole, things do work fairly nicely in this. I think that the film isn't hampered by just having the three main characters being isolated in the cabin. And I know sometimes with films, if I find that we're watching a film with a very small cast in one location, I've sort of been conditioned to be like, oh, there's a pandemic film where we're just going to be stuck in one place and things aren't really going to either escalate or move forward, or we're not going to get any kind of resolution anytime soon to what's occurring. It's not quite like that. I mean, I do think at 101 minutes, you could have shaved off 10 minutes quite easily. But it's paced okay, I feel, in terms of the struggles that they're encountering, where foraging is becoming harder and harder. They're struggling for food, so much so that Mama is starting to ask questions about how they're going to feed themselves if they're also going to feed their dog, Nolan's dog, I should say. Which does look like it's going in one particular direction where I would have almost turned the film off. Just as a dog dad. I don't like that in films. I know it happens a lot. I think the effects in this are pretty good. The scares themselves, I mean, it is more so about tension. I would have to say it is more so about building up tension throughout and keeping this sort of tight vice grip on you. It's okay in that regard. We get a decent conclusion. I would say things are kind of wrapped up in a nice way, but with a typical bit of a horror fashion to it. And I do think the final third of the film is its strongest part, really. Prior to that, it is just about more survivalism and paranoia. There's nothing really major bad about it, I suppose, but it was okay, really. It was just okay. I'm going to give Never Let Go 6 out of 10. And then next up, the film that has just dropped on Shudder today, the film that Stephen King had said something like it was his favourite film of 2024. The Rule of Jenny Penn. Okay, weird title, I know. So The Rule of Jenny Penn is a 2024 New Zealand psychological horror film based on Owen Marshall's short story of the same name. Directed by James Ashcroft and written by Ashcroft and Eli Kent, it stars John Lithgow, Geoffrey Rush and George Henare. The film was released in the United States on the 7th of March 2025. So, typically we don't have any blurb here, so I'm going to have to unfortunately go on my terrible memory, but I will open up IMDb to help me out here. So, oh god, there's a lot of stuff there. Confined to a secluded rest home and trapped within his stroke-ridden body, a former judge must stop an elderly psychopath who employs a child's puppet to abuse the home's residents with deadly consequences. Okay, so we open up with Geoffrey Rush's character, who is... Where's he on the cast list? Why would he not be at the top of the cast list? Right, that is bizarre. I've gone onto the cast list on IMDb and he's not there. So Geoffrey Rush plays Stephen Mortensen, also known as the judge. And at the opening of the film, he is judging over a case of child abuse, child molestation, that sort of thing. He gives a fairly lenient sentence before starting to blame the mother that, she isn't a victim in this because she could have stopped it a lot sooner, and it's getting a bit nasty before he ends up collapsing with a stroke. And this ends up leading him to needing to go into a kind of a care home in New Zealand, which is where the film's based, where he meets a number of the other guests, but he doesn't enamor himself to them. He's a bit of a nasty prick, basically. George Henare, who's a bit of a legend in New Zealand acting, plays Tony Garfield, and he's not very nice with him to begin with. He notices some of the other guests, in particular John Lithgow's Dave Creelia, a chap who seems a bit sort of childlike, and he walks around with this shell of a child puppet on his hand, which is known as Jenny Penn. One night, Geoffrey Rush is in the room that he shares with Tony Garfield. I get names right, and he wakes to see that Dave is sat in the corner of the room. Dave then proceeds to go over and start antagonizing and tormenting Tony, even going so much as to say, who rules? In this kind of creepy high voice, who rules? And the guy has to say Jenny Penn. And then he sort of turns his wrist around, because he's got the puppet on his wrist with his little arms. He turns it around to show his wrist to Tony and say, go on, lick her ass. And it's basically all about tormenting and humiliation. This guy's just basically like a creepy psycho. But Jeffrey Rush isn't one to be intimidated. So John Lithgow's Dave starts targeting him, waking him up in the middle of the night by emptying a bottle of urine on Jeffrey Rush's character's lap. And no one's believing the judge. They're just thinking, oh, he's having a funny 5 minutes. Dave wouldn't do anything like this. Dave's harmless. What are you talking about? Dave's accused you of stealing from him, bullying him. Things ramp up as the film progresses. The performances in this are brilliant. Jeffrey Rush is an actor who I just haven't really thought of for a long time. I sort of assumed that he maybe had retired, but no. He's still putting in stellar performances. The moments where he has these kind of blips, where it's almost like he drifts off to another place before returning, and he's struggling because he wants to stop what is going on in this care home, but no one really believes him. And the fact that he's losing his conscious awareness at times isn't helping the situation. It's not helping his case one bit. And then on the other side of the coin, we've got John Lithgow's Dave. He's got, I think, contact lenses in, which make his eyes look really blue, but really diluted. And he has these horrible teeth in, and he just is such a creepy individual. And he just relishes in basically causing torment. There's moments where they have these little dance classes where they've got some old song on. You know, these old elderly people are having a little dance around the room. He'll then come swanning in with his Jenny Penn puppet and then walk up to people dancing around, but then purposely standing on their toes. And then, like, swinging his arm around like he's dancing, but then purposely pushing an old guy in the back of the head. Even to the point that things just escalate essentially from there, and things do start taking a dark twist. It's brilliant, actually. Like, I do think that it lives up to the praise. Is it the best film I've seen of 2024, 2025? No, because I've seen Nosferatu this year, but it ramps up tension nicely. The performances, the two leads are brilliant. It's got a score by Rob, who I remember the name as soon as it popped up on the cast list. No, I'm getting the films mixed up. Rob did the soundtrack to Never Let Go, and he also did the soundtrack to Maniac. So I'm getting mixed up there. Soundtrack wasn't by Rob. Ignore that. Soundtrack on this was done by John Gibson, but it does this lovely sort of thing of feeling like everything is all, you know, like when you go to a care home to visit like an elderly residence, they've always got this really nice, happy old 40s or 50s music playing. But you never think that one of the other residents in this home could be dangerous to that extent. And, you know, wandering around the halls, no one's confronting them, getting away with whatever they want, and using that time to just ridicule, physically abuse, intimidate, humiliate the other residents. It's scary in that sort of way, as opposed to being he's going around slicing up people left, right, and centre. It's a different sort of fear. Does a really good job at that. But yeah, I really enjoyed The Rule of Jenny Penn. Her rolls, Jenny Penn rolls. 8.5 out of 10. It's available on Shudder right now. So if you got Prime, if you got Shudder, you're in luck. You got 2 films to watch. Anyway, Ghouls and Fiends. That is it once again for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Be sure to follow us on socials on X, Ministry_Horror. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, Ministry of Horror. Give us a follow on there, trying to build up those platforms, especially Instagram a little bit more. TikTok. Always try and follow the page, even if you don't normally tickety-tock. We've got a lot of little reels on there, including the clip of 90 Slave Fiancé. Brings me on to Patreon, of course. If you want to support the channel, support our growth, head to patreon.com/Ministry of Horror. You can be a free member, where you'll also get a chance to interact on the chats and all that good stuff. Vlogs go up on there, but we also have paid tiers, so have a look, and if you would like to join and support the channel, there are exclusives which get unlocked on those tiers. That brings me to 90 Slave Fiancé. As mentioned, we recorded episode 2. We are going to be doing the next episode in about a month's time, and we're going to be doing it live on Twitch. So there's a little exclusive for the people who haven't been able to watch it because they're not Patreons. The next episode is going to be live, and we're going to have a little think about what films she hasn't seen that would be considered classics of different areas of the horror genre, and put it to our various social media platforms for people to kind of vote. So that's going to go on the Discord, where a lot of the interaction goes on. Also social media platforms in general. And also just follow Twitch, because we're going to be gaming a bit more exclusively on there now. We did a little bit of an experiment of multi-streaming out from Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. It's a fun little experiment, but there's a price tag that comes along with that. So we're going to be going back to just exclusively on Twitch. So twitch.tv/Tezzius, TEZZIUS. Head to the channel, give it a follow, increase our follower list. If you have Amazon Prime, consider using your free monthly Twitch Prime Gaming subscription on my channel. It will really help support the growth and be much appreciated. But otherwise, please just give us a follow. It helps. Anyway, there's enough shilling from me. Thank you very much for watching on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube or Patreon, or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Till next time, ghouls and fiends, goodbye.